If all you know about The Great Escape is what you learned watching the Steve McQueen movie of 50 years ago, then you really don't know the story at all. And the angle you're missing the most is that it was a Canadian story. Author Ted Barris takes us through the story of those who got away, those who didn't, and their families at home in his new book, The Great Escape, A Canadian Story. And here's Ted Barris joining us now for the umpteenth time here in this studio.
Always with pleasure, sir.
How many books you written?
This is 17.
Okay, then you've probably been here 17 times because I think we've done almost all of them.
We have. You have.
Let's situate this Great Escape. Where did it take place?
It didn't happen in the Alps. The last scenes with McQueen going over the fence are depicted in front of the Alps. Didn't happen. Steve McQueen wasn't there. There were no fences. There were no fences in the way. What there was, however, was a camp in the middle of nowhere in Poland, about 110 kilometers southeast of Berlin, in what was then Western Poland, but occupied by the Nazis, of course. And it was the camp, Stalag Luft 3 is what it was called, was carved out of a huge pine forest. So not only were the men in it, officers all, penned in by two-line fences, about 360 acres, and barbed wire on all the fencing, coils between the two lines of fences, warning wires over which you did not cross, else the guards in the towers with searchlights and dogs with sentries around the exterior would shoot you if you stepped over the wire. And the Germans, because this was the inescapable camp, the camp in which all the bad apples were thrown, all the guys who had attempted to escape either last month or 3 or 4 years earlier were thrown in, the Germans decided to make this particularly difficult to escape from, and they put microphones in the ground so that they could listen for scratching and scraping and digging and pounding and whatever tunneling that might be. And that's what these guys were famous for. Their protection was the microphone system and a group called the Abwehr, which is, I think, German for aware. So all these guys, the guards on the inside, were listening, looking. All of the huts were on stilts so that the Abwehr, the ferrets as the Allied aircrew called them, could see under the huts to see if anything mysterious and clandestine was going on, like tunneling.
What were the conditions like in the camp?
Actually, not as bad as one might think. This was not a concentration camp. This was not the Holocaust. Why? Because these were officers and Allied officers, mostly Commonwealth officers, and Hermann Goering, who was head of the Luftwaffe, respected the Geneva Convention that said officers do not work, no forced labor. So essentially they were penned there until the war was over. So they brought all these officers, mostly Canadians and Brits and Australians and New Zealanders, few Americans, but not many, Americans who were in the RAF basically. And they put them in this camp and they were to be held there until the war was over.
You just mentioned Goering, and I want to go off on a tiny tangent here because I learned in your book that the first Canadian POW in Germany got a one-on-one meeting with Goering in which they talked about
hockey.
Hermann Goering was a hockey fan.
Well, he didn't know much about it, and he figured Canada hockey, there must be some connection. And Alfred Thompson, Tommy Thompson, was the first guy shot down 5 days into the war in 1939. And so he gets this interview, this audience with Goering, and of course they're pretty cocksure by this time. It's just 5 days into the war, and so Goering it's like a code of honor to have this Air Force officer come in, and he gets this interview, and then he goes on film. They actually did a propaganda film of him Thompson answering questions. Are you being treated fairly? Is everything okay? And of course he's nervously saying, yes, me and my fellow officers were fine.
Let's talk about the Canadian part of The Great Escape right now, and I want to do so by going through some of the major players in your book. I'm just going to put out some names here and just, riff for 20 or 30.
The movie ones or the real ones?
The real guys.
Okay.
We're not talking about Steve McQueen and his motorcycle anymore. Wally Flood. Who was he?
Wally Flood was known as the Tunnel King. His actual role was portrayed by James Coburn and Charles Bronson in the movie. Wally Flood was born in Chatham, grew up in Toronto. In the summer times as a young man, he goes north and he mines to earn money for, I guess, petty cash and maybe an education, but he learns how to work in mines, so he designs the tunnels. Interestingly, part of the thesis of my book, The Great Escape, A Canadian Story, is that the tunnel experiment, or the tunnel idea, it wasn't instantly dreamt up at Stalag Luft 3. Wally Flood was shot down in 1940. Like Alfred Thompson, the guy we just mentioned.
And this event happens in
1944. These guys were in training. Before Wally got to Stalag Luft 3, he was the designer of 48 tunnels in Stalag Luft 1. And all of them failed because the ground was too muddy, the water table too high, and the Germans too smart for them. And as Tony Pengelly, another guy we'll get to in a minute, he said the problem at BART, Stalag Luft 1, was that it was all the tunneling and escape efforts were private enterprise. You did your own thing. You got your own documents, you did your own digging, and everybody failed because you weren't working as a team. He said what we learned was we had to collaborate. Collectively, we had to pull off the big one, and it took them 4 years to do it.
Collaboration, a Canadian idea.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Who was
certainly.
John Weir?
John Weir was a Spitfire pilot, shot down in 1940 as well, over France. His face is badly burned. He loses his eyelids. He becomes one of Wally's chief diggers. He dug with a guy named Hank Birkeland, who was from Spear Hill, Manitoba, and grew up in Calgary. And one of them was right-handed and the other one was left-handed. I've forgotten which it was. But Wally made sure that if Johnny, if he was right-handed, went into the tunnel and dug to the right after him, Hank went in because he was left-handed and dug to the left, and it sort of compensated.
Did any of the three of them, Floody, Weir, or Birkeland, survive the Great Escape?
They didn't go through the Great Escape because, well, actually, sorry, correct that. Wally Flood was purged from the camp to Bellaria. Johnny Weir had his eyes fixed in grafting operations in the fall of '43, so he wasn't there for the Great Escape. Hank Birkeland escaped, was recaptured, and murdered by the Gestapo.
As part of the
50.
The
who were
50.
killed. Yeah.
You were there, right?
I've been there twice.
You've seen the memorial.
I have, and the grounds. They're all preserved. I mean, the trees have grown up through what used to be the foundations. The huts are all gone. The fire pool is still there, the bricked-in area where they collected water for washing and swimming and fire water if they needed it, or like bucket brigades. The theater foundation is there, and that's really interesting. We might get to that in a few minutes. All of the grounds are still laid out the way they were and are preserved. The Polish government, such as it is, has made this a historic site, and bit by bit they're building replica huts, goon towers, other displays to illustrate what happened there. And they've respected the Canadian input, but that's a long way away. It's not in Canada, it's not in Hollywood, it's in Poland that they do this.
There is a memorial plaque there, though, is there not?
There's actually a crypt and a memorial made of stone, which they built. Some of the guys who were decent stone cutters, and there were a number of them, were recruited after the escape and after the murders to build this memorial, and it's still there, and it's very highly respected and regarded by the Poles and kept beautifully like the Commonwealth cemeteries are.
So the obvious question here is, they've got microphones all over the place to listen for exactly the kind of activity that ended up happening. So how did they successfully build these tunnels?
First of all, they had had the practice in the previous Stalag. Secondly, everything was done on a need-to-know basis. There were sections, all siloed. There was a section that manufactured clothing. They took their uniforms and stained them, used polish to make them look like civilian, and retailored them to look like civilian clothes, so that the first wave that went through the tunnels, say the first 30 or 40, looked like businessmen. They had briefcases made of cardboard, but they looked like leather. That was a silo. There was a silo under Tony Pengelly, who was a bomber pilot from Truro, Nova Scotia, grew up in Weston, shot down. He becomes the forgery chief. He worked with 106 artists on forging documents, absolute replicas of the kinds of passes they would need to go through train stations and border crossings. And every one of them was right down to the last detail, a stolen identity of a German officer, a police representative, or a corporate representative with signatures, so that the documents looked lead pipe cinch accurate. That was siloed. There was a group of Australians who manufactured compasses, 200 of them for the expected 200 escapers. There was a whole section devoted to, in the movie, James Garner, scrounging. Wasn't an American. It was a guy from Calgary, Barry Davidson. He was a bomber pilot. He's down. He worked with a guy named Red Noble, another Canadian, and a guy named Keith Ogilvie. Skeets Ogilvie from Ottawa, who shot down a German bomber before it hit Buckingham Palace. He gets the DFC. He's later shot down. He becomes part of the scrounging team, fleecing the guards, blackmailing them, get cameras, film, all kind of paper they needed, and he was part of that silo. But nobody knew about what everyone else was doing. None of the guys I've just described knew what Johnny Weir and Hank Birkeland were doing.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Everybody, you couldn't give up the ghost, in other words, if you got caught.
Yeah, and you wouldn't know what the details were.
Right.
I mean, Albert Wallace, a friend of mine here in Toronto, I was with him today. He was at a memorial event. His job, he was a penguin. These are the guys who disperse the sand by putting the sand down in their pants in little bags, and they pull the string at the bottom and then scuffed it into the earth. Well, late in the tunneling of Harry between January and March of 44.
Let's remind everybody, Tom, Dick, and Harry, the three tunnels, right?
And there was actually another one called George, but that's later in the book. But Harry's the third tunnel, the one they push forward on January to March 44. Albert is involved in the penguin team, dispersing the sand by going to seat number 13 in the theater benches, trapdoor, put the sand down in, and they put 10 tons of sand under the seats in the theater between January and March. He knew that what he had to do for the sand dispersal, Al Wallace, he didn't realize for a month he was in the very room from which Harry was dug, and he didn't even know it was there.
Let's remind people how dangerous an undertaking this was. Never mind getting caught. Wally Flood is digging a tunnel, and it collapses on him, and he almost suffocates. These guys were lucky to just live through the creation of these things, right?
Yeah. Unlike the land that they were digging and the earth they were digging at Stalag Luft 1, which was mucky, and it was closer to the surface and flooded really easily, in Poland, at this particular area around a place called Sagan, the soil is very sandy and it's porous. The water table is quite deep. They went down through the concrete foundations under the stoves in the hut, straight down through the concrete, and then down further 9 meters into the sand before they went out 360 feet and then up outside the wire.
Digging with what?
First they were with wash basins and pieces of tin cups and so on. Then a guy named Johnny Caldwell comes on the scene. He was a farmer from BC. This guy was known as the Tin Man. He's a tin basher. He creates anything and everything out of scraps of metal and wood and wire and string, including tools. He was making stuff that the guys needed in their pantries to cook with and to, sew their clothes with, all kinds of utensils Johnny built. He also built the clandestine stuff that was used for the digging. And he was the chief of operations under the theater, dispersing the 10 tons of sand there under the floor.
How long did it take to dig Tom, Dick, and Harry?
They started just after April the 1st, 1943. Tom was discovered in September, blown up. They did a bit of a hiatus on Dick and Harry through the fall. Then they started up in January. When you couldn't scuff the soil into the snow, that's where the theater came in, and they worked fiendishly between January and March 24th, 1944, when the breakout occurs. And in a matter of 7-8 hours, they got 80 men out of the tunnel.
That was my next question. How did they decide in what order people were going to leave?
That was Roger Bushell, Big X. He was the head of the escape committee, and he made ultimately the final decision. It was actually quite practical. The men who went out in the first wave were going to go to the railway station, which was 2 kilometers away, on foot through the woods. They were dressed in business suits and had briefcases. They were also fluent in a variety of languages. Bushell knew German, French, Dutch. He was actually taught Danish by Frank Sorensen, Canadian from Kingston, while they walked around the inside warning wire. These guys were fluent in a number of languages, had the documents, looked like businessmen, had to get to the train station because that's when early in the morning, that's when the express trains going to Berlin went through Sagan. That was the first wave. The next wave, after 30 or 40 of them, were called the hard-arsers. These were guys who were bundled in warm clothing, didn't know language particularly well, had documents if they needed them, maybe documents that said they were going to work at such and such a company, okay? And then they survived on foot. Keith Ogilvie got 65 kilometers on foot in a day, and then he was captured.
How many guys did they get out altogether?
80 got out of the tunnel. 4 were captured right at the tunnel mouth in that moment in the morning. 76 dispersed. 3 made it all the way back home to England, the home run, and the rest, 77 were recaptured, and of the 50 who were executed, 6 were Canadians.
How were they actually caught at the end?
Well, this was part of the reason for the escape. The escape was to get as many German soldiers, German police officers, German civilians away from the German war effort as possible, to knock the Third Reich's war machinery off the rails. It's alleged that as many as 5 million people were out looking for these guys in the 24, 48 hours that they were on the loose. That's a lot of manpower.
Not spent fighting the rest of the Allies.
Exactly, which is exactly what they wanted to do. The problem was that the whole operation had changed. The attitude of the High Command had changed. Whereas with the Luftwaffe and the Allied air crew inside the Stalag Luft 3 prison camp, it was kind of like sport, cat and mouse. You did a breakout somewhere, maybe 2 or 3 guys got away, they'd be recaptured, they'd be brought back and thrown in the cooler. After that stay, you went back into the prison population, and then they waited for the next escape. It was kind of like, you know, I kept thinking of that silly cartoon with the Wile E. Coyote and was it the wolf and the sheep, where they check in the morning, hi Fred, hi Sam, and they go, you know, they check in, and then they go out and chase each other, and then it's all over at the end. It was almost like that. It was a game, except that the Gestapo got involved. And one of the things I think is brand new in my book is the discovery that the Gestapo was in on making the tunnel succeed.
Why would they want to do that?
So that they could dispense with the escapers the way they wanted to, not the way Luftwaffe wanted to.
With extreme prejudice.
Exactly. There was a lot of tension and jealousy between the services in Germany, and this was one of them. The Gestapo wanted to deal with these guys the way they wanted to, and that was...
Anthony Eden, the British politician, puffed out his chest and said, we are going to, if it takes forever, track down those evil people who shot our soldiers. Did he make good on that threat ever?
He did, and that's also new information in the book. Thank you for setting that up. He referred to it as exemplary justice. And what happens is Keith Ogilvie, the fellow I mentioned, when he gets back to England in 1945, he immediately goes to MI5 and explains to them that he saw some of his comrades, fellow officers, taken from Gorlitz prison within a week, alleged by the Germans to have attempted to escape and to have fought back, to have used weapons against the Germans who captured them. Absolutely not true. He saw that they were taken out in ones and twos and executed gangland style. And it was this information that triggered an RAF investigation unit to track down all those complicit in the murder of the 50. Nobody's seen this document before. It's transcripts of the interviews with those complicit in the murders done by the RAF investigation team. And then I stitched the details of the murders in the latter chapters of the book into the story, so we know how the Canadians died. It wasn't as it was in the movie, where they get out to stretch their legs and there's 50 of them out there and they mow them down with a machine gun. It didn't happen that way. It was cold-blooded murder by these thugs from the Gestapo, and they caught virtually all of them, had them interviewed and interrogated. They were sent to trial, and those guilty were executed. Exemplary justice.
Do you know whether, because so few survived, do you know whether any of them suffered from survivor's guilt or that kind of thing?
Oh boy, I'll say. Wally Flood, you mentioned him right at the top. Wally didn't talk about this story, even though he was the guy who designed the tunnels for years. He came home, went back to his flying business, got out of aviation completely, got into marketing, went overseas in a number of situations. He found himself in England just as the trials of those complicit in the murders happened. That's when he began to think about talking about it. John Sturgis gets a hold of him in 1961-62, says, Wally, we're shooting The Great Escape, the movie. Would you be a technical advisor? Wally decides now it's time. He joins the technical team, and they use his remembrances of the actual tunnel to get it right. And interestingly, at the end of the process, they shot for months, and Wally was there for some of the shooting of the film. And the last night Wally and Betty, his wife, were with them, the crew asked the two of them, and particularly Wally, did we get it right? Wally says, well, we had to shrink the tunnel to make it more claustrophobic, and they did that to make it accurate. He said, but the rest of it, I don't know if you got it right, but the nightmares have come back. So it was pretty traumatic. PTSD.
20 minutes from this studio is Sunnybrook Hospital, which has a role to play in this story as well. What is it?
The role in, you've got me. I'm trying to remember which of the guys ended up in Sunnybrook.
But one of the guys ended up there, right? Might have been more than one, actually.
There are several.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember which one now.
Because there's a plaque at Sunnybrook to these guys.
Right, that's right.
There's a connection to the Great Escape at Sunnybrook Hospital.
Because that was the focal point for so many of those wounded either mentally or physically in the return to Canada, Sunnybrook opened up its doors. It had done that earlier, but some of the Great Escapers who suffered from traumatic wounds were there, and that's why the plaque. I can't even remember what it says, but you're so right. It's just within a stone's throw of here. And what's even more important, I think, Steve, is that some of these guys are still alive, and all you have to do is knock on the door of their memory and these things start to come out, like Al Wallace. I went to Colorado Springs and I talked to George Sweener, who's 97 now, and he was the duty pilot. You know what the duty pilot did? He's the guy who stood on the inside of the gate and fussed with his laundry on a fence or something, or played chess with one of the other POWs. And based on the configuration on the chessboard or the way his laundry looked, was a signal to all the stooges, the security system inside, which Germans were coming in and out at the gate. And he was so good at it, and the Germans finally recognized that he was the signaler for the entire security system on the inside, they used it too to find out who was where. George Sweener is still there, tells these stories. He was one who actually did not go out, had a lot to escape to. He had just been married in 1942 when he was shot down, and found out just before he was shot down that his wife was pregnant, and his daughter was born while he was away. So he had a lot to get out for, but decided not to. He didn't feel strong enough in his language, didn't feel it was going to work. He was too far inland, and so he stayed behind and walks the forced march in the last months of the war, survives that, and gets home to see his daughter.
Nice. One last question. It's coming up on, what are we now?
70 years.
4 months away from the 70th anniversary of this thing having happened. And we haven't known for 70 years that this was a Canadian story. Why not?
Well, the images, the myth from Hollywood is so grand, is so powerful, that it's hard to knock it back. It's hard to say, excuse me, wait, before you roll the film. Although I'm going to do that in February. I'm going to go to a theater, and we're going to screen the film, and I'm going to do a sort of a before and after and say, here's the real story. We're going to do that on Groundhog Day on February the 2nd. But I think that's part of it. The myth is so big, so large. Today, almost 70 years later, The Great Escape is the movie. It's still the third most downloaded, booked, rented war movie of them all. The third most. I think it cost $4 million, grossed $11 million. It's probably grossed 10 times that in rentals since, because we love it. How do you beat that? You don't beat the Americans at that game. And with all those stars, McQueen and Garner and Attenborough and everybody, those are the images we have. The images of Wally Flood and Johnny Weir and Hank Birkeland and all those guys, Albert Wallace, fade because they're not movie stars. They're average Canadians or average people who volunteered in all these services. Volunteers don't get a whole lot of credibility in the media, in history.
Well, kudos to you for at least trying to
Tipping
right
the
the
bat.
scales a little bit, eh? Good job. Ted Barris, The Great Escape, a Canadian story. Let's remember that. As always, Ted, thanks a lot.
Pleasure.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.